Well, hey Life Science, hope you're doing well when you watch this video. Today we're going to be starting our plant discussion. As I told you before, this unit is not in your book. Your book only talks about photosynthesis, but this was in a previous life science book, and I think it's beneficial for you to know about plants, especially considering that in biology you will learn about plants. And it's, of course, it's on standardized testing. Plants are always on standardized testing some way. So let's go ahead and get started. Can plants think? It's a pretty cool question to ask yourself. And there's been some studies that show that plants do communicate and respond to the environment. But as far as processing goes, of course, they don't have brains or anything, but they do actually transmit signals through their bodies. Sometimes when there's an infection of insects, will communicate, letting the other plants know, hey, something's coming your way. There's really cool videos that you can look up, stuff like that. But you've probably seen lilies on a pond. So lilies, that bird is not, it's on a lily pad. And plants called water lilies make lily pads. And so what part of the plant is the lily pad? Is it the leaf? Is it the flower? Is it the stem? And how are water lilies and other plants alike, and how are they different? So it's something that we're going to be talking about today, plant diversity. So do you agree or disagree? All plants produce flowers and seeds. Obviously, these are questions for classroom setting, but we will learn that some plants do not produce flowers or seeds. Some produce only spores. Humans do depend on plants for their survival. Some plants move water only by diffusion, which should be said osmosis there, but we will see that some plants have vascular systems similar, not extremely similar, but they have tubes inside of them like we do. We have tubes inside of us. Mosses can grow only in moist and thick and shady places. Yes, that's true. Some mosses and gymnosperms are used for commercial purposes. That's also true. And all plants grow, flower, and produce seeds in one growing season. Well, that will be false. So here's some of the objectives if you want to pause and kind of read over these. But the first thing, and this is what your book really, discusses pretty well. But basically, I want to walk through this slide with you. This is a picture of photosynthesis in a little bit more of an advanced form, getting you prepared for biology. Okay. So where are we at? Well, we are in a plant cell inside the organelle known as the chloroplast. The chloroplast allows plants to do photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is water plus CO2 in the presence of light, and then those are the reactants. That's what goes into the system. And then oxygen and sucrose or glucose or various products are made. Those are the products, what we make, what the plant makes. And so I want you to know a few things here. First off, where water goes into something called the thylakoid membrane technically. And thylakoids are kind of like these green stacks of pancakes, but basically they have these machinery in there, enzymes and proteins that allow water to be basically split by the energy in light. And so what light does is that they take basically, and I don't want to get, of course, too over your head for introductory life science in 7th grade, but basically what happens is we get these electrons from water, and light excites those electrons. And those electrons are transferred, because there's a lot of energy in them, they're transferred in this molecule right here, NADPH. This process also makes ATP, which you already know we talked about, is cellular energy. And so that high energy electron right there and this ATP is used to take CO2 and make it into sucrose, or we would consider it, say, glucose probably would be a better term right now for us. And glucose is C6, I'm not going to be able to write this very well, C6, oh, that's a really good C, C6H12O6. So it's kind of like Legos. If you take one carbon and you're trying to build something that has 6 carbons plus a lot of other pieces, you have to input energy. Where does that energy come from? It comes from right here. But this energy is directly related to the light. Without sunlight, this system shuts down. Without water, this system shuts down. Without CO2, this system shuts down. So you can see that this is the system inside the chloroplast. So I want to ask you a question. Here's your first question I want to ask you. Remember, email me these questions, please, or post them on LMS. But what is ATP and NADPH used for in the Calvin cycle? The Calvin cycle, I didn't mention this, I'm sorry. 2 reactions, light reaction, of course, because it depends on light, and dark reactions, or light-independent reaction. That's also known as a Calvin cycle, named after the person who discovered it. And so the Calvin cycle is literally happening in like the fluid in the chloroplast. called the stroma, but it's in the fluid. And the Calvin cycle basically takes CO2 and makes sugars for our purposes right now. So that is the Calvin cycle. The light-dependent reactions, or the light reactions, take light and split water basically and create O2 gas, which is important for cellular respiration. We desperately need oxygen, but plants do also. Plants cellular respire. So what is ATP and NADPH used for in the Calvin cycle? That's questions part 1. So here's the equation one time. This is from Khan Academy. You can see here, these are the reactants, these are the products, and we will see in future videos, or right now at least, photosynthesis goes this way, and cellular respiration goes the opposite way. They are related. They are definitely related, and plants do both. And so we desperately need plants. So plants are autotrophs, which means they make their own food through photosynthesis. We are heterotrophs, which means we have to eat our food. The sun is the initial source of energy for most communities, except ones down deep in the ocean near hydrothermal vents. And so questions part 2. I want you to contrast heterotroph and autotroph. And so you might think, like, again, we don't really think of plants very often, most of us. We think of anything related to nature. We think of animals. Animals are cool. We have them as pets. Not many people have pet plants, but some people do. But we don't think that plants do anything. We just kind of think they're there. But no, they're actually amazing. Plants do defend themselves. I could show you various videos right now that I would show you in class, and you can look them up about plant defense mechanisms. But something that a lot of y'all love, caffeine, right? Coffee, energy drinks, which are horrible for you. I would strongly recommend you not drink them. But caffeine is actually a defensive system. The plant doesn't use caffeine to get more alert for the day or anything like we do. Caffeine is actually a defensive mechanism. It's a compound that deters insects from eating it, and so that's what caffeine is actually used for. So it's pretty cool. Of course, it energizes us. It blocks adenosine in our brain, but it's pretty cool. Plants, you can see that this insect looks like a plant. That's an insect here. Plants and insects, sometimes insects mimic plants to blend in, camouflage, of course. But plants have come up with many ways, much like insects do, to adapt to the world around them. So first off is cell structure. How do plant cells differ from animal cells? Well, plant cells are eukaryotic, so that's not how they differ. But it contains chloroplasts and a cell wall. We do not, as animals, contain that. So here's a great picture here to kind of like pause and look at. But here's a plant cell. So what I put stars by is really where the differences are. The cell wall, we don't have a cell wall. Vacuoles, central vacuoles. So we have vacuoles and very small vesicles, but plants have a central vacuole which stores water. And so you've seen this if you've ever crunched celery. If the celery is crunchy, there's a lot of water in the central vacuole. And if the celery is like not like very limp and like noodly, that's not a word, but it's not much water inside the vacuole. And then finally the chloroplast, which we just discovered. Of course, this is an artist rendition. There's many chloroplasts and a lot more complicated than this. This is just trying to help us understand. But chloroplast is where photosynthesis happens. So questions part 3. How is a cell wall different than a cell membrane? I want you to tell me 3 ways. Look it up. How is a cell wall different than a cell membrane? So plants have adapted. Sometimes plants can be very different sizes. Plants are multicellular, but some plants are microscopic. So here's the world's smallest flowering plant is the watermeal, Wolfia globosa. Found this bright green oval plant is about the size of a grain of rice. There you go. And the largest trees on the planet, I want to see them one day. That's the chandelier tree, the sequoias, great redwoods, California, majestic. I so much want to see them one day. Definitely on my bucket list. And so plants are producers, which means they're the foundation of these food webs. I'm not sure if you've ever seen this, but this is a food web. And so for example, this very simple food web for our purposes, plants are the producers. So the plants die, all these organisms are hurt, they migrate away, or they possibly perish because the grasshopper eats the grass, and then the hawk can eat the grasshopper, or the lizard, which eats the grasshopper. But everything starts with the grass, and of course the grass gets its energy from the sun. So producers use an outside energy source such as the sun to make their own food. Plant adaptations. And so literally plant adaptations, they have adapted, of course, according to naturalistic evolution. not according to the Bible, but they evolved from green algae according to naturalistic evolution. The Bible teaches that God made plants in kinds. As land plants became more abundant, the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere increased because oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis. But an interesting question to ask is if the environment was so toxic in the first place, because there's not much, uh, just a different type of environment, how did plants survive that, And so it's just interesting. So again, look up things, ask questions. Don't just take whatever someone says as fact when you start hearing about evolution. And I'd even encourage you to search the scriptures and see what you're hearing from me as far as the Bible says. Search them, search them, search them. All right, so protection and support. Plants, these are adaptations. Plants have a waxy cuticle. It's a waxy layer that coats the surface of stems. Like, what does it do? It keeps plants from drying out. See, water can leave plants as far as vapor goes. It's called transpiration or evapotranspiration. So cuticle prevents that from happening. So that's an adaptation. Also, plants are very strong. They have cellulose, and this is what cellulose looks like. Lignin, which is a very uh, strong polymer which prevents plants from bending too much, and it's very strong and gives them support. Lignin. Plants transport materials through diffusion and osmosis. And so what happens is, really quick, we've already talked about this, but diffusion is movement from high to low. You can see that. And water is basically moving from high freedom to low freedom for our purposes. So you can see here that the water level is sort of the same, but not the freedom of water in this U-tube. Yeah, YouTube. All right, so so you can see how it's kind of the same, but right here is different. Well, what happened? Well, there's a lot more free water over here because it's not attached to these molecules. So water moves from high freedom to low freedom. And so it moved across this membrane that the solids can't travel, and that's what happened. So plants transport materials through osmosis, which is water moving from high freedom to low freedom, and diffusion, which is solids moving from high concentration to low concentration. There are some tubes inside of vascular plants, at least, that transport materials. Vascular tissue is a complex conducting system. So there's a couple of tubes here that I want you to definitely know. Phloem and xylem. Okay, phloem and xylem. And I'm actually going to ask you a question to research that instead of just telling you the answer. So I want you to contrast xylem and phloem. What do they do? And what do they look like? Plants also, for the plants that have seeds, they transport seeds in different ways. Of course, a lot of us, eat seeds. Most of us do as a food source. But these are the types of ways that seeds can be dispersed. Gravity, wind, ballistic, which means they shoot out, water, and by animals. So I don't know if you've ever walked in a field and got these stickers. They sometimes hurt. One time I had stickers in like a pair of shorts, did not know it, sat down in my car, nothing good happened. And so yeah, stickers are well, what the goal is that these sticky thorns and stuff, they attach themselves to animals passing by, and then somehow some way eventually get dispersed farther away from the plant. It's an adaptation. These plants are amazing, and you can look them up, but they're gliders. Sometimes plants use wind to transfer the dandelion right there, of course, but also Mitra macrocarpa, I hope I said that right, but it's literally like a glider, and it's a tropical Asian climbing gourd. And so I encourage you to look it up. It's beautiful. I mean, Life, the documentary, the series Life, I think BBC does it, I believe, but they do amazing videos, and they did a whole video on plants that I like to show in class when we have inside classrooms. But yeah, check it out. It's really cool. But plants use wind, plants use water, coconuts use water to transfer their seeds, and so it's different ways that plants can do seeds. Now, not all plants make seeds though. Some plants produce by spores, and they are called seedless plants. They do not have flowers. So again, when you think of plants, you probably think of something that makes a seed and makes a flower, but that's not all plants. Some don't even have that vascular tube system, xylem and phloem. Okay. And some, such as ferns, have the vascular system, but do not produce seeds, and those are called vascular plants. So some produce fruit, some don't. So here's an example of kind of like the tree of life for plants according to naturalistic evolution. So basically all plants came from ancient green algae. You have non-vascular plants which do not have tubes, and vascular plants which have tubes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about these mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And then the club mosses, ferns, horsetails, and then we get to our seed plants, which is really what we probably think about when we think about plants. Gymnosperms are like your pine trees, Christmas trees, ginkgo biloba. There's only one species left, but it's a very old tree according to evolution. Cycads are pretty unique plants. But then we'll talk about grasses and flowers and all the angiosperms a lot in a different video, okay? So here's a cladogram based on plants. You can see, according to naturalistic evolution, origin of land plants 400, 500 million years ago. And then we started developing these adaptations, seeds, vascular tissue, flowers, and all that increased the likelihood of chances of plants surviving. Again, according to naturalistic evolution, the Bible would teach that God created plants according to kinds. And so I don't know if you've remember elementary school, but you probably heard about Johnny Appleseed. Well, Johnny Appleseed, there's a song. I don't know it. I would sing it for you. Actually, I wouldn't, but there's a song. But his name was John Chapman. He's a nurseryman. He loved nature. He became an American legend because he was very kind and generous, and he loved nature. He was a leader in conservation, and he kind of became a symbol, planted many apples in like Pennsylvania and Ontario, Illinois. He actually even was a missionary for the new church. So it literally his story is well known. But seeds, right? Yeah, you eat lots of seeds, beans, corn. Seeds can come in different like styles, I guess. These are both trees that you will see in Florida, the magnolia and the pine tree. You can see pine cones. These are gymnosperms. Literally means naked seed. And then this flower will produce a fruit, and that will become a seed as well. And so sometimes, I don't know if you ever walked in a forest, maybe up in the Smoky Mountains or something, but you've seen this like green kind of carpet growing on stuff. Well, those are mosses. Mosses are very simple plants. So let's briefly talk about mosses. Mosses are known as bryophytes. Any green seedless plant that's one of the mosses, hornworts or liverworts, that's known as a bryophyte. They are the simplest of all terrestrial plants. They lack complex tissue organization, which means they literally have to get stuff by diffusion and osmosis only. How do they stay attached? They don't have roots. They don't have these tubes and stuff complex. They stay attached with something called rhizoids. Rhizoids keep them attached to the ground. And so mosses, liverworts, mosses and liverworts are small, right? They live on bare rock, no vascular system. Here's an example of mosses. Here's what liverworts look like. Sometimes they live together. But why are they important? Well, they're important because they're usually the first plants to inhabit a new environment after a disturbance. They help hold the soil in place, which prevents erosion. They sometimes can be used as fuel. And so I want to ask you a question right here. Let me show you hornworts real quick. Hornworts right here. Again, common name, horn-like structure. They only contain one. They're very small as well. So these are all examples of bryophytes. And so they don't grow very tall. Why don't they grow very tall? Because they do not have vascular tissue. They can't transport water and nutrients up, a very great distance against gravity. So here's the question. These guys are known as pioneer species. I want you to look up from an ecology standpoint. Why are pioneer species like bryophytes important? What role do they play? Why are they so important? So not only do we have, simple plants, non-vascular plants, but we also have vascular plants. So over 90% of plant species are vascular plants. So you can see the advantage, right? It's definitely an advantage to have vascular tissue. 90% of plant species have vascular tissue, which means there's the roots and the stems and the leaves. This helps plants transport water and food over greater distances and allows them to compete for resources. You've seen ferns in Florida. This is an example of a fern found in Florida. Ferns are all over the place in Florida. Ferns are an example of a vascular seedless plant. They do not make seeds. Club mosses are another example of a vascular seedless plant, by spores only. Horsetails, literally back in the day, people used to use these to clean pots, which makes sense if you look at them. They look like a scrub brush. But most of the time they're now found in gardens. But they're native to Florida, naturally found in wet areas. Horsetails. Questions part 6. And this, I think, is where we'll end for this video today. How are non-vascular and vascular seedless plants alike, and how are they different? Okay, so 6 set of questions. I hope this video was helpful. I probably got maybe 2 or so videos left on plants to show you before our test next Friday. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you watched this long, you are a rock star. May God bless you and your family. I'll talk to y'all later.